Welcome back to Gale Force Wins Season 4.
Well, I'm Alan Dale from Gale Force Winds, and I have to tell you, I'm in a very, very special place today with a very cool guy. I'm in the captain's day cabin on board His Majesty's Canadian ship Haida, a 1942 built in Newcastle, England, a tribal class destroyer, served our country with incredible distinction. Now we have a new member serving with incredible distinction. And on that note, Jeff, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your journey.
Great, thank you. First, thank you for being here and it's joining me aboard this great ship. So I'm Honorary Captain Jeff Topping. In my civilian life, I work for McDonald's restaurants, but certainly incredibly honored to be an honorary captain with the Royal Canadian Navy and to be able to spend time aboard this great ship.
Jeff, talk to me about kind of your younger years, where you grew up, how you grew up, what were some of your big influences in life?
Yeah, so I was born in Windsor, Ontario. We left Windsor at a young age, and so I spent the rest of my life primarily in London, Ontario, which I still call home, with my wife and 3 kids. Growing up, my influences beyond my parents, of course, were my grandparents. And both of my grandfathers served in the Royal Canadian Navy. One during wartime, and one wartime plus a 25-year career, and then some in the Navy. So that both of them were tremendous influences on, I think, who I am today and, some of the things I appreciate today.
Brothers, sisters in the mix?
Yeah, I have a younger brother.
Yeah.
It's we get to see him once in a while.
Yeah.
Just mom, dad, and my younger brother, so a rather small family.
Jeff, growing up in London there, what were some of things that you were involved in? Hockey, sports, anything like that, in an academic journey? Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so it's completed my high school career at Catholic Central High School in downtown London. From there, at a young age, I started working with McDonald's restaurants when I was 16 years old.
Okay.
I thought I was going to do it for a year and not tell any of my friends until I got a better job. 36 years later, still working for McDonald's restaurants.
Okay.
I'm not the fry guy anymore, so it's moved on from that. But in that journey, I also had an opportunity to do some schooling at Fanshawe College and Sheridan College as well.
Right, Fanshawe, Sheridan, 2 great colleges. Of course, Fanshaw's got a great connection to the military as well.
They do. Peter Devlin over at Fanshawe. Great military schooling, military connection, or campus, I think they call it. It's a great connection to the community and to be able to help serving members complete their schooling.
Jeff, talk to me about now. I want to go back to your first time you walked into McDonald's. You're 16 years old. You're working on the line. Talk to me about that experience.
Yeah, it's funny. So it's just before McDonald's, I worked for Mary Brown's Fried Chicken. Thought it was a great gig, but my friend worked at McDonald's and they got free food and paid a little bit more. So I made the journey over to McDonald's, which was next door, got hired. It was a really good experience in the sense of training and, it's responsibility, leadership, so it's kind of grew in my positions as I stayed longer. It just became a great place to work, and I never had a reason to leave. It was always fun. It's still fun today.
36 years with the company.
Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about the journey from one position to the next.
Yeah, so I worked in the restaurants for quite a few years at various levels of responsibility and positions. So, you kind of start off as a part-time manager while you're still in school. So you learn management, but you're still, it's only part-time. So, able to do all the things as a teenager does or a young adult. And then progressed in the restaurants until I was running my own restaurants. Did that for a couple years and then got promoted and actually went back to Windsor for 5 years. So I ran the city of Windsor. So the restaurants in the city from an operations point of view. So it's responsible for 10 restaurants.
Yeah.
And from there, came back to London. I worked with owner-operators and how they, from a corporate relations and how they run their business as a partner, as a consultant. and then found myself, oddly enough, working in restaurant development, construction. So it's which no construction background at the time, but that's the unique thing about McDonald's. You never know what you're going to be doing, and the opportunities seem to be endless. So I started overseeing the renovation program and architectural drawings and such. Really loved it, so today, if I fast forward, I'm the National Director of Real Estate. Again, it's no background in real estate, but it's about leadership and people.
Right.
So I lead a team of professionals that acquire all of our new locations, land, leases. It's to grow the McDonald's footprint across Canada.
Wow, you're right. So, you're no longer the fry guy.
No.
but that's really fascinating, to know that a company like that. I mean, we drive by McDonald's all the time. I mean, people drive by, and it's amazing. The people that I've spoken to that have started their career working there, they all got something out of it. There was something about the experience at a young age that McDonald's gave them. And I think many people don't understand that. And it is leadership. It is teamwork, right?
Yeah, it's not just it's that fast food job, or it's. I always hated the term like burger flippers, because it was so much. One, we don't flip the burgers, and two, it was so much more than that. And to the fact, our president today of McDonald's Canada started in the restaurants.
Wow.
It's a few years ahead of me, Michelle Boudria, and today she's running the Canadian business. And many of our executives, many of our owner operators, corporate staff started in the restaurants. So when you walk around the office, and we all have name tags with our start date.
Yeah.
To see the tenure, it's to have that tenure there's a reason behind it.
And a lot to be said, right? If a company can retain people that long, believe in them and trust in them, right? Empower them. That says a lot about the company.
It does, and it's there's a lot of institutional knowledge, which can also be dangerous. It's because you can get very tunnel visioned. So having new talent join the organization as well, adds to that institutional knowledge and new thinking.
Right.
So we're always trying to stay ahead of the curve, trying to what's that next new thing. Always hungry to be number one and to drive the business in the Canadian footprint. So it's and still remain uniquely Canadian, which McDonald's is.
Yeah.
It's even though we're part of this global empire, uniquely Canadian.
I love the use of the word hungry there. Jeff, let me flip back to your granddads for a few minutes here. Talk to me about those fellas.
Yeah, so it's my grandfather, Cliff Langlois, farm boy in just outside of Windsor, Ontario. War starts, joins the Navy, volunteers, actually goes through Prevost, and makes his way to St. John's, Newfoundland, as a shipwright. Eventually becoming a chief petty officer because of the experience he already had from the farm. He was also a construction contractor, so so he had that experience in leading groups of men and working, as construction or industrial. Falls in love, typical wartime story, to Doris Bishop, who was a school teacher in St. John's, Newfoundland. And actually, was John Crosby's grade school teacher at one point in time. Connection to history. So he served for the duration of the war. So when the war ended, came back through Hunter, retired from the Navy, carried on with life. His bride came with him, and spent the rest of his life as a contractor.
Wow.
Grandfather number two, Bing Topping, William Topping. Bing was his Navy nickname, because he said when he put his uniform on, he felt like Bing Crosby. So it's the name Bing stuck. So he joins in Kingston. It's near the start of the war. Shipped out to Halifax. It's a couple weeks later type of thing, and found himself as any aircraft gunner. So it's served aboard a number of ships.
Right.
Skeena was his first convoy duty out of, I think they went out of St. John's, Newfoundland, actually. Convoy duty. They sunk a sub on his first, foray into to war. And then, spends time in Halifax training a number of different ships till he got sent overseas to commission Haida. So it's 1943. He was part of the original crew to commission Haida under command of DeWolf. at the time, and spent the remainder of the war as an anti-aircraft gunner aboard HMCS Haida.
Being here?
That's him there. So that's him. Sorry, that's him as Chief Petty Officer. So he was Man of the Month in the Crow's Nest,
right? Oh, right.
The Navy magazine of the time, and that's his photo from that.
Oh, wow!
But what great photo of him, and as much as I remember him, I never knew him as a Navy guy because he retired by the time I came around.
Yeah.
But always knew kind of his Navy history and past. He was very modest. Didn't tell the stories so much. Tell something serious and then change to something funny.
Yeah.
So it's because those memories were tough.
Mm-hmm.
But he served for 25 years.
Wow.
So it's and coincidentally, his last sea duty was aboard Haida in about 59-60 or 61 as coxswain. So to come back to a ship you loved, kind of where a lot of it began.
Yeah.
As coxswain.
Right.
It's a great position of prestige. Like you're the pinnacle of your career as a non-commissioned member of the Navy. Was a great source of pride for him.
It's not lost on me that at Bing, if I may call him that, that he would have been stood in this exact space.
Yeah.
And many times briefing the captain and discussing as part of that command team, right? He would have been in this very room. Isn't that amazing to think?
It is. It's so it's, as I tour the ship, I'm here a fair bit because it's today I'm president and chairman of Friends of Haida, who help run the ship with Parks Canada. So I get to spend a lot of time aboard ship, and oftentimes when no one's here, to sit in the coxswain's office.
Yeah.
Or when I toured with my grandfather here in '94, he showed us where he slung his hammock, back in '43. So to sit in that space, the mess that he was a part of, it's and the stories that he told, and kind of be able to make the connections to the ship and where those things took place. Incredible history, incredible for me personally, to maintain that connection.
What was it about the Navy that drew these two fellas in? Because they're not necessarily surrounded by ocean.
No.
But what was it about the Navy that drew them in?
I'm not sure. I mean, a typical of reservist, volunteer reserve at the time. So it's the prairies in central Canada supplied so much of the manpower for the Navy at the time, but no connection to water or the sea, or like his connection to water would have been rowboating. Right. It's my grandfather Langlois would have been Lake Erie. So it's but it was I'll tell you, my grandfather, so Bing, he went to sign up for the Air Force actually. So him and his buddy Johal Baker they actually went to the recruiting center in Smith Falls, just outside of Kingston, to the Air Force. So they were both going to join the Air Force. So it's while Johal is being attested for joining, my grandfather was strolling the streets, ran into a group of Navy sailors in their uniforms, and thought, this is what I want to be.
Right.
So he switches his mind from Air Force to Navy. So it's and Johal, goes overseas, Battle of Britain, actually never comes home.
Wow.
So it's that may have been one of the last times they saw each other, and that decision and splitting ways. But he loved the Navy, like from day one, loved the Navy.
Wow.
I love being a part of the Navy, love being in the Navy. His memories of time and service. Again, very modest, like not bragging about what he did.
Yeah.
But he loved what he did.
There's a little doubt, given what you just told me, that there's salt water in your veins as well. But talk to me about your intersection with the Navy. When did that happen?
So a lot of it was, growing up, hearing the stories. So my grandfather Langlois, when I was a young kid, like I used to pull out, he saved all his Navy badges. So his cap badges, his buttons, and all that. And I used to look at him as a kid, and he would tell me the stories. And he gave me all those badges, so I still have them today. So I heard his stories. And Bing, I heard his stories primarily about Haida. So he was always very proud of the ship. It was a lucky ship, Canada's most famous warship, the fightingest ship in Canada. and DeWolf. So he had a tremendous admiration for DeWolf. You know, it's how he conducted himself, how he ran the ship, how he cared for the men in his command. So we often heard stories about what a great man DeWolf was growing up. You know, so I think that I love history in general.
Yeah.
So that connection to the Navy, the connection to Haida and my grandfather, both of them in the Navy, you know, it just piqued an interest.
Right.
You know, it's so fast forward. You know, we toured my grandfather here in '94. It was my first time aboard Haida. So touring the ship, this is incredible. And hearing the stories, being there with my grandfather. Fast forward again, you know, I came aboard ship to fly an ensign for my grandfather's 90th birthday. Right. So that was the present.
Yeah.
So, excuse me.
Yeah, that's good.
So that flag, you know, he said, Jeff, you know, he gave me all his Navy memorabilia, his pictures. You know, it's his history as the caretaker.
Yeah.
And that flag, he's like, make sure that flag is on my casket.
Okay.
You know, I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah.
So mission accomplished.
Good.
So, but I became that caretaker of history.
Yeah.
So it's so today being part of Haida, you know, part of that is that family legacy, caretaker of history.
Right.
But this history is important to Canadians. You know, to be able to tell the story of the Navy of the past,
right,
and now the Navy of the future.
Yeah.
I think is incredibly important.
And you told me everything you told me there. All I could think in the back of my mind, there's a little doubt in my mind that DeWolf was telling stories about your dad in some circles, right? You know.
Yeah.
So as much admiration as he might have had for Admiral DeWolf, I'm sure DeWolf had the same for your dad. It's just your granddad.
I think so. Like it's so they served together again on the aircraft carrier Warrior.
Okay.
And because DeWolf, I think was Commodore at the time, was in charge of both of our aircraft carriers.
Yeah.
As CO. And when it got posted out of the aircraft carriers, my grandfather was at the brow, and he said, "Topping, do you want these?" And he had a manila envelope. And my grandfather's like, "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir." And he said, "I had no idea what was in the envelope." So DeWolf handed him over an envelope. You know, they saluted across the brow, the whole bit. And he had given them all these pictures from their days in Haida. You know, so it's that DeWolf had kept or had, or
yeah,
you know, I don't know if it was spur of the moment or thought out. Who knows? But so he cherished, and I have those photos as part of that history.
Wow.
DeWolf was again, to me, DeWolf was Canada's Nelson.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's if we were to have one, like it's his story is incredible. Who he was is incredible.
Yeah.
I'd like to think they had a great relationship of some sort.
Talk to me about Haida. Like, you know, Haida obviously runs deep in your bloods and there's got a lot of media, but talk to me about the importance of Haida to Canada. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so as you mentioned on your intro, this is the last tribal class destroyer that was built. You know, it's the UK built a bunch during World War II for themselves. Canada built a few. The Commonwealth countries built a few, and they were a great little destroyer. You know, it's super effective at what they did. You know, during wartime, through Korea and Cold War around the world. But slowly, as things go, they served their life. And Haida had put in 20 or so years of service and was showing those strains of service and war. It was going to be scrapped. You know, so it was off to the breakers. You know, because I think at the time people didn't really think about that historical significance of Haida sunk the most number of ships of any Allied vessel.
Wow.
You know, it was involved in so many different excursions, action, Murmansk run up into to the Arctic. Was there in the Channel during D-Day, and then on to, you know, Korea and Cold War and that. So the legacy of service is incredible. So to be able to preserve that for Canadians for the future and to tell the story today to the young ones that come aboard, or the new Canadians that come aboard,
yeah,
or those who are just interested, to be able to tell our maritime history
Yeah.
and our service around the world, I think is incredibly important.
Haida wasn't always here. It wasn't always part of Parks Canada. So what was its journey after? How did it get here?
Yeah, so it's a group of businessmen saved Haida. So they mortgaged their homes, to save Haida. Peter Ward is one of those original members, still living in Ottawa, is well into his 90s, and Peter and I have had an opportunity to meet a number of times over the years, and to hear his story of saving the ship. So they buy this ship from the Canadian government essentially, with the thoughts of turning it into a museum tribute to those who served. So for a number of years, it was on the docks in Toronto. As they went through the trials and tribulations of how do you turn a warship into a museum, and open it to the public, which they did successfully. Ends up at Ontario Place for a number of years. A real fixture at Ontario Place. Peter Ward convinces Prince Philip to become the patron of the ship, because Prince Philip toured the ship during one of the Canadian tours with the Queen. Ran overtime because he was having such a good time, threw the schedule off. Peter, as he tells the story, approached Prince Philip to ask him to be the patron. And Prince Philip's like, you can't ask me that. There's a protocol. And then leaned in, is like, and here's how you do it. So he becomes the patron. The ship needed repairs, after years of being at Ontario Place. So the Heritage Minister at the time, Sheila Copps from Hamilton, steps in. The federal government is going to take over the ship, pay for the repairs, make this a National Historic Site under the leadership of Parks Canada. So the ship goes under refit. It's about 20 years now, 21 years ago, comes to Hamilton. Grand entrance into the bay. It's firing her guns, big celebration, and then docked here along HMCS Star for the last 21 years.
It's not lost on me. Just last year, one of Canada's newest ships came into port, and there was tours both on it and on.
Yeah. So one of my great moments, I guess, as memories, was I got to take Harry DeWolf. So we boarded Harry DeWolf in Toronto, sailed over to here to Hamilton,
right, with
Peter Ward. So with right? Peter Ward and Jim DeWolf, one of Harry's sons. So it's Peter, myself, and Jim standing on the bridge of Harry DeWolf as it pulls in bow to bow with Haida. And I remember going to say something to Peter, and I got choked up. And I look, Peter's choked up, Jim's choked up. I'm not sure there was a dry eye on the bridge, except perhaps the captain who was trying to
get it in there. Yeah, it was Guy Cote, right?
Yeah, Guy Cote. Yeah. I said, don't scratch Haida, because that's when you realize what a massive ship Harry DeWolf is. Yeah, kind of towering over Haida. But to have the two ships together was a great moment, because Harry DeWolf was actually supposed to be commissioned here, right? But COVID got in the way. Yeah. So it's so finally getting Harry DeWolf together with Haida and doing those exchanges. It was a great week.
Spectacular story. So, Jeff, here you are, and I'm going to refer to you as Captain now.
Sure.
So, Captain, here you are. Turned out in your gear. You're an honorary captain with the Royal Canadian Navy. Talk to me about that, what the importance of that is for you, and tell me a little bit about what honorary captains do.
Sure. So it's so for me, the journey kind of continues, like the work I was doing with Haida and the engagement I had with the Navy. And one of the things as I took over Friends of Haida as president and chairman was I wanted to engage the Navy in a more substantial way. So it was the ship had just been Haida, recommissioned as the flagship of the Royal Canadian Navy. So we are sitting on the flagship of the Royal Canadian Navy, which is fantastic. Great honor for the ship, and to make that connection again to history. But I wanted to continue that engagement, so started working with the Navy, and I actually wanted to join the reserve, but they didn't let me in. So it's so I went through all the testing, the physical, the force fit test, the whole bit, recruiting. turns out I have a hearing issue that I didn't know about.
Okay.
So my official Navy career I thought was over.
Right.
So, but I wanted to continue to serve. So it's my motto became serve those who serve. So it's how do I support the Navy? How do I help their mandate and lend a hand where I can? So started getting really engaged. Did Canadian Leaders at Sea. Spent 5 days aboard HMCS Calgary. It's not a VIP cruise.
Right.
So it's in uniform. It's sleeping in a rack. It's doing damage control and man overboard exercises.
Craig Robichaud would have been the guy that you...
I know Craig well. Yeah. It was Melissa Desjardins, who was our officer in charge, and Johnny Cowenberg was the CO.
Great program, right? The Canadian Leaders at Sea. What a great way to engage Canadians.
Absolutely. So that was the eye opener for me.
Right.
It's to see the men and women serving and in action, what they do, hearing their stories. It's about deployments and their trades and the different things they've done in their careers.
Yeah.
I was fascinated and wanted to do more. So I came away from that program. How do I do more? How do I help more? So it's supported the Navy and Navy bike ride. It's organized the Canadian Leaders at Sea team. To fundraise and to lead the way. It's different alumni events and just engaging with my local unit, Prevo.
Right.
Working with a cadet unit that parades out of Prevo. It's Courageous.
Okay.
It's sharing history with young cadets.
Right.
That type of thing. And that engagement led to a nomination to be honorary captain.
Stop me there.
Yeah.
What did that feel like when they told you were going to be nominated to be an honorary captain?
Yeah. So I was sitting in Vice Admiral Topshee's office.
Okay.
I'd gone for a coffee visit.
Okay.
So we're D&D headquarters, sitting in his office. I had some things that I wanted to share and some thoughts and, different things we could do. And he was he's kind of like, I'm going to stop you there. He said, I have something like an assignment essentially. He's like, we'd like to nominate you for honorary captain. I was blown away.
Wow.
I was speechless. I was literally speechless.
Yeah.
And to think about it, like what an incredible honor.
Yeah.
Now, no guarantee. Then he follows out with no guarantees because
Sure.
Then he laid out the process.
Yeah.
Because it is a very regimented process of the nomination goes forward from the Kraken, to the Chief of Defense Staff, and ultimately the Minister of National Defense signs off on whether you become an honorary captain or an honorary colonel, on the Army Air side. So it's an appointment by the Minister of National Defense. So it's like, that's to me was mind blowing.
And when did that official appointment come in?
January of this year.
So January of this year. So we're a few months into this role. Still a little surreal for you?
It is.
Just to sit here with wearing the stripes of a captain in the Navy.
Yeah.
On board the very ship that your granddad served in, the captain's cabin.
Yeah.
It must be a surreal feeling for you.
It is. So it's, I would say, putting on the uniform for the first time, wow. It's kind of the weight of
you
so
look
many.
like Bing Crosby.
Yeah.
Go on.
I'll get a new nickname. Putting on the uniform for the first time, one was the incredible honor, the responsibility that comes with it, to do the position right, to do the right things, and the respect for the sailors, the men and women in uniform that do this as a career, whether reservist or reg force, to represent them well. It's felt like an awesome responsibility, but the honor of putting on uniform, to serve one's country. To me, there's no greater honor to be able to serve one's country and to serve others. Then it dawned on me too, I didn't have to do basic training. So it's had to become a reservist, those number of years ago.
Right.
It's that path would have been very different. So it's also very daunting of, I put on the uniform as captain without the history that comes with it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the first time I had to salute, crossing the brow. It's or the first time I was on, parade as a reviewing officer. Those types of things. I didn't have a lot of practice. So it was a big learning curve at the same time, but loving it.
I have a lot of history there. You've got a lot of history in your family to lead you to this point. And I want to talk a little bit about Prevost. Tell me a little bit about that unit. I know that to be a very special unit in the Royal Canadian Navy. Great people come out of Prevost. They always have. Talk to me a little bit about what Prevost means to you.
Yeah, so it's HMCS Prevost, reserve unit in London, Ontario, at the Forks of the Thames. A great history. It's starting in wartime, so stood up for the wartime effort in London. And thousands of sailors. Those farmers that we talked about, or it's Canadians from Central Canada passing through Prevost before being deployed elsewhere. So it's a number of sailors pass through those doors, wherever the unit may have been in its existence in those early days. So after Canadian Leaders at Sea, I started getting engaged with the folks at Prevost, and instantly knew, it was a special unit, great people, great sailors. Both that junior sailor that's just starting out the career, and the seasoned sailors that were leading the unit, and got to know them, and consider many of them friends today, just from building those relationships. So to be able to step on the deck of Prevost, or cross the brow for the first time in uniform, as their honorary captain, their first honorary captain, because they've never had one before, is something pretty special. And being able to engage with the sailors of today, and hearing, that life of a reservist, of balancing the civilian life and the military life, whether that civilian life is school or a profession, full-time work, and serving their country at the same time. It's taking time off from their careers to deploy, whether it's op creep, keeping drugs out of the country and protecting our waters, or op lentis of serving here at home during disaster, and it's things that are going on domestically that they're called upon. They're always ready to serve, and do it so willingly, and giving of themselves. It's so to be a part of that is an honor.
It's also not lost on me that the CO of Prevost, Mike Butler, started off not flipping burgers, but he started off right at the very bottom in the Navy. And now here you have, it's pretty amazing. The two of you guys are working hand in glove, and both of you started right at the very bottom of your organizations, and you've worked to the pinnacle isn't that amazing to think?
It is. Well, and so I'd like to think that foundation came from McDonald's for Mike, because he actually had a stint at McDonald's.
There you go.
So we swapped stories of what it was like in the old days, working for McDonald's restaurants, and the start it gave us. But like individuals like Mike, who have got to know over the last couple of years, it's and now is CEO of Prevost, be able to work with him, it's fantastic. And an incredible individual, done many things through his military career, and you're right, and is now at the pinnacle of it, to be in command, of your own ship, Stone Frigate, but your own ship, is I know a thrill for him, and an honor for him as well. And he's going to do fantastic.
I've always had such great respect for Prevost. I've had the great pleasure to work with many of their sailors and many of their commanding officers over the years, and there's just something very special about that place. They're one of those units in the Navy, and lean in. They're one of these groups that lean in and just get things done. I had the pleasure just a few weeks ago to meet a sailor from Prevost, S2 Grace Park, who, she's a student, she's got a part-time job, and in the summers she goes off, and she was on board a destroyer on board the Fredericton for the summer, serving her country and just fitting it all in, right? And ever so proud to be part of Prevost, and that's the good things that Prevost do for us. Another good thing that Prevost is doing, talk to me a little bit about a memorial that you're setting them up there. Yeah,
so it's HMCS Prevost, a number of years ago, started this Battle of the Atlantic Memorial. It's started off with some small thoughts, as of how do we honor those who came before us? How do we recognize, the contributions of the sailors from our area, because when you think of Battle Atlantic, you think of Halifax, and it's the convoy crossings and that, it all happened there. But so much of it came through. Like we built ships in the Great Lakes here for the Battle Atlantic. The manpower, the men and women that served our country during that time. Canada's the world's longest battle, spanning from the start of the war to the end of the war, to keep those convoys going. So they started off with a memorial to the ships. So a stone marker for each of the ships lost. It's about 27 in total from Canada. So it's as a tribute. So how do we tell the story in some way, some fashion? So they built a really nice memorial to those ships. And that's probably about 2017, 2018. So it's very nice, nice landscaping, a nice spot to hold the Battle Atlantic Memorial, to come together and remember, and to pay tribute to those who gave so much for the freedom that we enjoy today. So it's to fast forward to today. One of the components that was missing was the tribute to the individuals.
Okay.
So if you think about, it's my family and I were just in Normandy. So it's standing on the sand at Juno Beach, thinking about those Canadians during D-Day. But then you can also go and pay tribute to them at the war graves. And it's an incredible moment that just puts into perspective the sacrifice to see all of those headstones, row on row. It's the hundreds of Canadians, and that's just one small cemetery. Multiple cemeteries throughout Europe to the Canadians. But if you think about the Navy, it's so many were lost at sea. There's no grave. There's no marker or stone to touch or to remember that name, that tribute to that individual. The sea is their grave. So the expansion, the significant expansion to the project, is the Walls of Honor. So it's building Walls of Honor to be able to list all of the names. It's close to 2,000 Royal Canadian Navy members that never came home, that have no marker, have no grave. To be able to create a permanent place that you can touch, see, feel, and pay tribute to all of those names of sailors lost, and to tell their story. So it's that's what we're building, and telling the story of the whole Battle of Atlantic. So the Navy, obviously, a huge component of that story. But the Royal Canadian Air Force, 750 airmen were lost during the Battle of Atlantic. We're trying to protect those convoys. So we're paying tribute to them as well in a similar fashion. And of course, the Merchant Navy. So it's the Merchant Navy, the countless ships that were lost in those convoy crossings. It's slow-moving vessels carrying the cargo, munitions, food, the needs of Europe to keep them sustained. The sacrifices they made are incredible. So it's our memorial includes tribute to the Merchant Navy as well. So for the first time in Canada is a whole Battle of Atlantic memorial. Wow. Navy, Air Force, Merchant Navy, paying tribute and telling the story. In addition to that, if that wasn't enough already, is telling the history for the future. So there's an education component as well. Okay. So it's a virtual component where you can scan a barcode or pull up on your device a virtual sailor that tells their story. What it was like crossing the dark Atlantic on a convoy. It's trying to evade the wolf packs of subs, or a ship and what happened to it. So telling the history for future generations, so that Canadians continue to learn and don't forget about our history and the importance of what these men and women did so long ago.
Everybody's name.
Everybody's name.
It strikes me very similar to the memorial to the effort in Vietnam in Washington, where you can go up and you can
etch the wall.
And is that the goal there too?
That was one of our goals.
Right.
So Captain Sean Batty, former Prevost CO.
Yes.
It's great leader of the initial Memorial and continues to be a great advocate and supporter of what we're doing today. Working with Mike, myself, and Ed Holder, and Heather Broadhead, and others to bring this to life. That was one of Sean's, exact things. It's got to be like I can rub my thumb across the name and feel the name or etch the name. So that's exactly what we're accomplishing.
Captain, when will Canadians be able to see this? When do you hope to unveil all of this?
So I have a hard stop, if you will.
Okay.
So I've committed to the commander of the Royal Canadian Navy, Vice Admiral Topshee, that our memorial will be ready, completed, finished, unveiled for Battle of Atlantic Sunday 2025.
Okay. Wow.
To mark the 80th anniversary of the Battle of the Atlantic. So it's our intent is to hold the national ceremony for Battle Atlantic Sunday to recognize the 80th anniversary of the battle next May. So the memorial has to be ready. We intend to break ground here late September, early October, to get the components in and in place before the winter comes,
right?
So that we're ready for that first Sunday in May.
How can Canadians help with this effort? Do you need help with this effort? And how can Canadians lean into it? Yeah, so the greatest way Canadians can help is of course an endeavor like this takes money. Right.
It's there's resources behind it and great support that we have, but it takes money. So donations are extremely welcome.
Okay.
And folks can donate through our website, www.boamemorial.com.
Okay.
So there's ways to donate through that webpage. We have a great challenge coin that folks could buy for $100, essentially $100 donation.
Right.
We'll get you a tax receipt and a coin.
Cool.
And it's the coin is brilliant. It's an individual who actually designs coins for the Royal Canadian Mint. Really? Is involved. Yeah. So it's and because this is, if you think about this isn't London or Prevost Memorial. This is Canada's memorial. It's a national memorial. So we're trying to pay tribute on a national scale. So Canadians across the country want to help and support. That's the best way they can do it.
It sounds like you got a lot on your plate on that front, but I'm going to ask you, what else, as honorary captain and otherwise professionally, what's on your horizon? What are you most excited about in the coming years now? Yeah,
aside from the memorial, so it's which is some heavy lifting, and the work here at the ship is always ongoing with HIDA. Is really getting into my role as an honorary captain. So one of the greatest responsibilities that come with the role is being an ambassador. So telling the story of the Royal Canadian Navy to everyday Canadians, to business leaders and community leaders, to our politicians. To be an advocate for the Navy. And what our Navy needs. We've just about finished building the Harry DeWolf class ships. We've heard some announcements about subs that are needed on the horizon, like combat surface vessels. So anywhere we can be an advocate with our politicians on why we need these items, these platforms, to continue to serve and to continue to do the work for Canada, to keep our shipping lanes free and clear. It's keep drugs out of our country and domestic operations. But in general, just being that great ambassador for the Royal Canadian Navy, and in any way I can. It's on a day-to-day basis.
I want to tell you, it's been an absolute pleasure to be in conversation with you. Your history with the Navy, with Canada, runs incredibly deep. I really enjoy that. It's not lost on me where we sit together and as we have this conversation, being right behind us, watching over our shoulder to make sure we get it all right. But I want to tell you, it's been a wonderful experience to be in conversation. We wish you the very best of luck with the memorial. Certainly, people that are watching this, get out and get those challenge coins. And the final point, of course, to the Navy, they need people too, right? And just like when you went on that Leaders at Sea and you touched and felt and the Royal Canadian Navy and talked to those sailors, you were hooked, right? That's the way Canadians are. If they understand what our Navy does, they're going to want to be a part of that, right?
Absolutely. Some incredible people serving our country. And they do it without fanfare. It's very selfless. It's very modest as Canadians.
Yeah.
But they have an incredible story to tell. So it's an honor to be a part of that. It's been great chatting with you here aboard HMCS Haida. Yeah, not lost on me either. Like, it's what a platform we sit on today. And I'm so thankful to that group of individuals so many years ago that had the foresight to mortgage their homes to save this ship so we could be a part of it today.
Captain, I always ask people that come on the podcast, fellas like you that have had interesting journeys through life, to leave the audience with a piece of advice. What would that piece of advice be?
Oh, wow. I mean, my advice is really what I say to the folks I work with and those that I come in contact with is, it's always people first. No matter what we do, whether it's the Navy, the ship here, at work, it's people first. So, take care of the people that you work with, that you engage with, be an advocate for them. Always have a mindset of people first. And that'll lead to long-term success.
Well, I'm going to leave my own thoughts as we end this thing, and there's little doubt that the Royal Canadian Navy, the country of Canada, and the globe needs more Captain Jeff Topping. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to Gale Force Winds. That's Gale Force Winds, WINS.com.